Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a term you've probably heard thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean? We're diving into queer politics.
So, LGBTQ+. That's a term we're all familiar with. But queer politics? What's the deal with that? Let's get right into it. Because, while these terms are obviously related, they point to two very different ways of thinking about social change. One's about fitting in, and the other is about tearing up the rulebook entirely.
All right, first things first, to really get what queer politics is all about, we have to start with the word itself, queer. You can't understand the politics without understanding the journey this word has been on. It's really the key to the whole thing. See, this is so much more than just a word. It used to be a weapon, an insult, but the community took it back. And that act of reclaiming it, turning a word meant to cause pain into a symbol of power and identity, that, right there, is a political statement. It's the first step. And that brings us to the core idea. Queer politics isn't just about getting equal rights or a seat at the table. It goes deeper. It's about looking at the table itself and asking, wait, why is this table shaped this way? Who decided on these rules? It challenges the most basic, fundamental ideas we have about gender and sexuality. The goal isn't just inclusion, it's liberation.
Okay, so let's break that down a little more, because this is where things get really interesting. How does this idea of liberation stack up against the more mainstream goal of inclusion? This is the big difference we need to talk about.
I love this quote because it just nails the difference, right? LGBTQ+ politics is about getting a seat at the table that already exists. But queer politics steps back and asks, is this even the right table? Should we build a new one? It's a completely different way of looking at the problem.
Let's put it side by side. On one hand, you have LGBTQ+ politics, which is often focused on inclusion. Think about the fight for marriage rights. That's about gaining access to a system that's already in place. It's a strategy of assimilation. But then you look at queer politics. The goal there is liberation. It's not about trying to fit into the existing structures. It's about dismantling and completely transforming those structures.
So where do these ideas come from? Well, this isn't just something people came up with on the fly. There's a whole field of thought behind it, and it's called queer theory. Let's dig into some of the big concepts that really drive this whole perspective. At its core, queer theory says, hey, you know all those neat little boxes we put people in? Male, female, gay, straight? Well, those boxes aren't as natural or fixed as we've been taught. They're actually built by our society, our culture, our language. And a huge part of this is challenging something called heteronormativity. That's a big word, but it just means that invisible, powerful idea that being straight is the default, the normal way to be.
A really key thinker here is Judith Butler, who came up with this concept of gender being performative. And what that means is, it's not just about who you are deep down, it's about what you do. It's like we're all following a social script we learned from day one, how to act, talk, and dress in ways our culture labels masculine or feminine. It's a constant performance, not something static. And another major influence, the philosopher Michel Foucault, kind of zoomed out even more. He argued that it's big systems, we're talking medicine, the law, religion, that have always been the ones to draw the line between what's considered normal sexuality and what's not. So for him, it wasn't about what's natural. It was all about who holds the power to define the rules.
Okay, I know that's all a bit theoretical, right? So the big question is, what does this actually look like in practice? How do these big ideas play out in the real world, in activism and politics?
Well, this is where it all comes together. A queer political lens isn't just focused on a single issue, it sees the connections. So, take marriage equality. It might say, yes, people should have the right to marry, but it will also ask, why do we give the government so much power over our relationships anyway? For trans rights, it's not just about changing a name on a driver's license, it's about liberating everyone from restrictive gender roles. And it understands that you can't fight for things like economic justice or better healthcare without also tackling things like a broken criminal justice system. It's all part of the same web. And it's important to see how this approach interacts with other movements, like feminism. They have a lot in common, for sure. Both are fighting patriarchal systems. But queer politics can sometimes push back, asking tough questions about fixed identity categories. For instance, it challenges the very idea of woman as a stable single group, really leaning into the idea of fluidity, which isn't always the starting point for some types of feminism.
And you really can't talk about any of this without talking about intersectionality. This is a crucial concept from the incredible scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. It's the idea that you can't just look at one part of someone's identity. Things like your race, your gender, your class, your sexuality, they all overlap and intersect to create a totally unique experience of the world. So the challenges a Black queer woman faces aren't just racism plus homophobia, it's a specific combined experience. This is absolutely fundamental to queer politics.
All right, so we've covered a lot, but what's the bottom line here? Why does this distinction between inclusion and liberation even matter? What should we take away from all this?
At the end of the day, it really comes down to this. Queer politics is about changing the rules of the game, not just trying to win at a game that's already rigged. It forces us to look past the easy victories and ask the really tough questions. The goal isn't just to be accepted by an unfair system. It's to have the courage to imagine and then build a completely different system that's truly just and free for every single person.
And that leaves us with a pretty huge question to think about, doesn't it? If we actually challenged all the things our society calls normal, if we started to really question the foundations of how we live, what would that even look like? What kind of a more liberated, more open future could we build for all of us?